Hey y'all, it's Monday. Welcome to this week's episode of Race Kiki with Jonathan Lee. I am your host, Jonathan Lee. I hope your day's going amazing. If not, it should be, because you took a breath this morning and you deserve to have an amazing day. But enough about you, let's talk about racism. This week's guest is my beautiful, fantastic, talented, charming, rocker, roller skating, badass friend, Kristina Bivona. Find her website, it's amazing. I have all that information below. But we talk about racism, we talk about growing up poor, we talk about one of Christina's relatives was in the Klan, y'all. Yes, we talk about that too. Get into it. It's delicious. Kristina is fantastically great at telling a tale. So, like and subscribe. And oh yeah, get into it. You'll love it. Okay. Have an amazing day. Hey Kristina, welcome to Race Kiki with Jonathan Lee.
Hi Jonathan, good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Living life as lively as I know how.
I understand. Did you get vaccinated yet?
I had my first one, yes, and then I'll get my second one on my birthday. So I suppose I'll be spending the next day in bed, not doing anything too fun.
What I've heard, my friend Michael of the Michaels said that they did a Tylenol and an entire bottle of Pedialyte before they got their second shot, and they were fine.
Okay, I'm gonna take that advice because I think
what they told me.
Yeah.
So I was like, Scott and I we still have the antibodies because we got COVID.
Oh my, I didn't know that.
I know we kept it very, very low key because we were very, very, very lucky and very fortunate to only have had a fever for like a day and a half and then been lounging around our apartment. So most of the time we were asymptomatic, and I'm very thankful and very grateful about that.
Me too, and I'm thankful for your antibodies too, now that they're here.
But we still will be getting the vaccine as soon as we're eligible. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I brought you here to ask you one question. It's a fun question. It's super easy. When did you learn about race?
Oh, fabulous question. Oh, wow. I learned about race pretty young. I went through my formative. So I'm going to refer to race in this instance as race with a lowercase r, because it wasn't a humane concept at a young age, but I was young. I went through my formative years in the Deep South.
Where?
Right outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee.
I'm from, I was born in Natchez, Mississippi.
Oh, I know. And I'm always sort of blessed with this like idea. There are times where I reflect on like the experience of the South. Just this morning, I was thinking about it and thinking about you and thinking about ignorance versus like the South is just as racist as the North is just as racist as the South, but the South carries an ignorance with it that is really hard to contend with, and it's coded in a different way.
I think that the South has a different relationship with race than the North does. It's a more direct history with the actual ownership and oppression of people. And then seeing those same people and the ancestors of those people wandering around the streets with you.
Yeah, I remember talking to my aunt a few years ago on a visit, and she just sort of laid out a moment, an instance of her ignorance, where she wasn't, in her mind, coming from an ignorant place. She was trying to inquire on something she didn't understand. And I remember sitting on the back porch with her and being like, how do I get in to this conversation with her so that she has it with me longer than she would if I told her what I really thought about what she just said, where it's like, okay, this is the work. It's time to unpack this and unpack it and meet her closer to where she's at than where I'm at so that she can hold space longer. And we did pretty well. It was learning to like ask questions and listen. And I'm not always the best at that. That's something that, like, with my like intermix of privileges and disadvantages, I've pushed through and become very loud and extroverted. It has helped me in a lot of ways. And a lot of that is on the back of my white privilege. You know, being a loud, smart white girl in a classroom moved me in certain directions that I wouldn't have got if I didn't come out of my shell. But when it comes to speaking with folks of my race, of my family even, it's about applying the same standards that I also apply when I'm sitting with folks who are talking about their racial experience. And it's a measure of kindness that's really hard to dig deep and find when you hear someone say something that is violent at the very center of what they're saying. So she was just expressing that she didn't understand the poverty and the actions that were happening in Chattanooga with the Black community and the cry for more support. And, you know, I had to walk through that with her a little bit more closely. And I certainly didn't leave the conversation feeling like we got anywhere near where I wanted to go. But I do think that, like, she not only felt heard, but felt questioned. And in that questioning, had to reconcile some of what she was thinking. And that was like enough to lay my head on the pillow that night and take a deep breath and get ready for the next day, just move forward again. But it is very scary when you see the relationships that people have with race, just how far we have to go.
But it's the same relationship that has existed with race for, I don't know, since we got here.
Yeah.
And I mean all of us, because your people are immigrants as well, if we're going to be completely.
Oh yeah, definitely settlers. Like,
Yeah, no, not settlers, colonizers.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm in this point in my life where I like to use actual words, and we as Americans love to code things, and we use this. I remember when I was a child, and I it's not lost on me that I stepped on your story about when you learned about race, and we're going to circle back to that.
No real problem.
Just thought, but I remember I grew up in Mississippi, as I said, and we would play cops and robbers and cowboys and Indians. Well, they would play. I'm pretty sure I didn't, because as it was pointed out to me, when I was a child, I was quite prissy. So I stayed in the house and played with thoughts and books, because that's what I have this aversion to getting dirty. I always have. I think it's gross. Anyway, I don't know why I brought that story.
It's okay. I love it.
But we always, when kids are playing cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, and all of these things, what we're doing is playing this battle of good and evil, as if the cops are good, the cowboys are good, the robbers are bad, the Indians are bad. But in reality, the cops are probably operating from a point of white supremacy, and the cowboys are probably operating on a premise of colonization, taking what is not yours and then putting a flag on it and making it yours. But these are the games we tell our children to play, reinforcing this narrative of white supremacy.
Yeah, like you're being indoctrinated into living borders, making borders by play. And if I know anything about being an educator, play is learning.
It's programming.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes,
programming is, yeah.
We have been, there's not a way to escape the programming of white supremacy in America as it stands right now.
Agreed. And that's a daunting feeling. Like, and I think that it's bizarre to me that it's not a feeling that everybody accepts or acknowledges, because I think, like, there are life experiences for folks of color from day one that you don't have the option, and this is presumptuous for me to put it that way, but as I process, it's like, that's not an option. But white supremacy allows it to be optional, the option of even seeing one as racial. And it really isn't an option if you have any desire to not cause unnecessary harm. I think that that's what I think about a lot, is that there's life experiences. So like since the beginning of time, this power dynamic has existed. And we play it out in various different scenarios in life and in our structures. So it's like both individual and community. There's just some stuff, like I hear white people talk all the time about like their lives are also hard. Perhaps they came up poor and they have an inability, a block of thinking about like how they're still of more advantage, and the lack of questioning around that systemic issue continues to perpetuate that advantage to the disadvantage of other people. Because life is hard, and we are all going to have experiences that pull us into our own existential crises, into depressions, into just mourning, etc. However, there are hurts and harms that can be avoided and or not enacted. And that's what I think, like today, as I come to sit with you, like I bring that with me. It's like there are some things that we don't have to experience, and racism, despite it being part of like played out from the human condition, is not one of them. We have names for it. We've got a way to talk about it. We need to do the talking and do the working.
Well, what I've noticed in having these conversations, even prior to starting this project, the minute white people, you people, y'all folks, namely white women,
yeah,
the minute you people, and I hate that particular connection of words. I hate you people, because the minute you say you people, I distance myself as far away from you as I possibly could get. But the minute white women get uncomfortable in any regard, the only rule in the room is we have to fix her discomfort.
Yeah.
We have to. If you and I are in a conversation and you start to cry, the burden is on me to make it stop as quickly as I possibly can, unless I get in trouble. Even if you've been the one that has offended me. Because you have the power of white woman. I sincerely believe that most of the laws in our country have been written in a way to protect the delicate sensibilities of the white woman from herself, because she can't be trusted.
Yeah, and no real discourse has evolved around the fact that like that lack of trust socially is not to the benefit of the white woman.
No,
and it is
not.
done to it is supported by the oppression, by actively oppressing other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that particular type of oppression is the seedling of Karen. The Karen trope, this hostile, aggressive, entitled white woman, has how when you're getting shit on from on top, the only way you feel comfortable in lashing out is to lash out as someone you feel greater than. So that you have these emboldened, battered and beaten, and I don't mean that in whatever sense of the word, battered and beaten women out here in the world having their fathers, their husbands, their brothers, their sons controlling their body, controlling their choices. And then they're coming into a situation where there's someone else that they feel greater than, but then they try to make control over this particular white woman, and she attacks with the venom, not necessary for that particular situation, but it's that venom that has been piled on by people she feels like she can't attack.
Mhm. That's so that's so accurate. And as you're talking about it, I'm just picturing like the imagery from sort of the last year's discourse around the Karen. And like, it is also, I learned recently that the trope of the Karen is delineated from actually inactive times. And I think it's Miss Anne would be the term used prior for other
Mhm.
like it's not a new
By the
thing, like
slaves,
this.
yes.
Yeah, the weaponized white woman.
Yes. It
I
is the
am
most
scared.
dangerous. It is the second most dangerous affront to black men is white women.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
And
first is the
it's,
cops, but yeah.
I mean, and there's so many white women that hide behind the cops. It's also like, as soon as cell phones were in everyone's hands, that became a weapon in so many ways. I was so appreciative back when, and it's so appreciative is like for lack of a better word, but like when folks just started to film on so like if Karen's calling 911, the actual access to cell phones by the greater community being able to film the way things were actually going down. Because I think it started to reveal that like there's more to this story than has ever been told. And actually it has been told. It's just been told by people who aren't being listened to.
Mm-hmm.
And this person, these women that I am of that ilk are not even open to the whole story. They're telling only their truth. We aren't taking the time to perceive of any other life experience than our own. And it's exactly because of what you're talking about. It's being pushed upon from the top of another structure on top of you. But, I don't know. It was Huey Newton that said, we're not going to fight racism with more racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. And that's meaningful to me.
I think we also have to fight racism with an accurate depiction of our history,
Yeah.
and the fact that all of it makes white folks uncomfortable.
Oh, it does. It really
Because
does.
what happens is we're talking about history, and most of history, the way we've been taught in this country, has people who look like you as the victors,
Mm-hmm.
always the hero. When the accurate depiction of history is told, it is a it is not as good. For instance, I'll give you an example. Buffalo Bill, the cowboy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I haven't thought about
Everybody,
that character in a while.
yeah, but I remember like people would revere him, like he was like this big sportsman, and he would do all the things to the buffalo. So he killed over 4,000 buffalo. The reason why he killed over 4,000 buffalo was to get rid of the indigenous tribes that were following the migration of the buffalo. In addition to doing that, he also would murder indigenous people. And then during this whole time, our US government was paying money for the scalps of Native American indigenous people. The United States government was paying money for this. In addition to while all of that was going on, we were still actively slaving and excluding Asians from the country and deporting Mexicans back to Mexico, but allowing them to come into the country to pick the crops in America because, you know, it was cheaper to hire them in, but then force them back home after we were done with you. America.
It's a
only country I know. It's the only country I know. And all of these factoids that I've learned, I did not learn them in school. Those weren't taught to me. These are facts that I went out on my own and learned about the actual history of this country, because I grew up in the I don't see color. And my favorite, I don't have a racist bone in my body.
Oh, I haven't heard that one in a while, but it is a common one when it was, your whole body is racist though. Like, it's one of those things where like folks are really, they struggle to like, it's the individual obsession of the American US citizen is like, I am myself, I am independent, and I am like cavalier. That's that whole colonist mentality. So to actually evaluate yourself as like a whole body amongst others is not, as we were talking about, sort of like programming. It's specifically like forced out of us to consider ourselves as an extension of others and vice versa.
Well, I think that the one thing with America is we love American culture, shall I say, is American culture is white culture. When I ask the question, when did you learn about race? It's so funny when I ask that question, because not one white person yet has included themselves as a race.
Oh.
Not one. When I ask that question, it's always in relationship to another, not to yourself, because white is a race if we're going to believe that racism is a thing.
Yeah.
And that race is a thing. If we're going to believe that race is a thing, when I ask, when did you learn about race? You should have included yourself in that conversation, right? But because we've been conditioned to automatically consider other.
Yeah.
When you learn about race, you learn about something other than you, something different than you.
I've had to teach my daughter at home this last year. And I hope, and I think, and if I haven't, I think I will, and decipher new ways of doing it, is start to get her aware of that. And I think it's time for me to do that with real intention, because I think it's somewhere in the back of my mind, within the fiber of my, I don't know, we could say activism, whatever, that it's coming out in conversations. Like, I've been able to take and educate her about current events, about the continued murder and genocide of Black bodies in the United States, and sitting with her to sort of like answer her questions as to like what is happening and why it's happening. Or like, we're reading a book on Josephine Baker, and she has it was taking us months to read it. It's a kid's book, but she has so many questions surrounding like, well, why did she do this? Then why did she do that? And just unpacking that with her has taken me so much time, and I've had to really think about it. But in general, I don't think that I've given the space to actually saying like Lydia, like we're a white race. You're a white person and your skin is this color and it comes with these caveats, these harms, these violences, these treatments of exceptionalism. Like I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to fold it into the curriculum this week, but I think it's time to slow walk through that.
How old is your daughter?
She's 6.
Okay. That is wow. That's an interesting conversation to have.
Toolkit. This is why we're like at a disadvantage, I think, with anti-racist work is like moms like me I don't know where to, I'm going to make it up. And that's good because then someone else can work with me on it and build with me on it. I just can't wait until my daughter comes of age and is also doing that work. Like I just need other white women to kind of work with me. And I try to branch out and I do fairly well, especially with folks that are a little bit younger than me to connect in these conversations. But I'm always like, where's my, like, other 36-year-old, like, upward mobility white moms, like working at home and in the world to try to do it. So yeah, when we talk about discomfort, as you mentioned before, we're also talking about failure. And I think a lot about like what it looks like to do this and fail without a greater consciousness and a larger support system, because it's okay to fail and it's okay to exist within that discomfort. But there's a lot of there's a lot of malformation that can happen if in fact there's not a space to workshop those attempts, because a lot can be told to a 6-year-old that they will take to the bank.
And so they will believe forever.
Absolutely. So it takes a lot of but there's an urgency around it. However, it can't be rushed.
I will say that back to my initial question, a lot of those answers come around 4 to 6 years old. A lot of them, when I ask that question, most people tell me something at around that age.
Definitely. That's where I was traversing.
So tell me your story. Tell me the story, because I interrupted and then we went like on a journey.
Oh, memories are very funny things. We sort of rewrite them and cipher them as we go along. But I love you and I want to come to this with 100% in me. So I'm going to say something that I haven't yet the ability to hold it well enough to do what it intends to do. So just sort of disclaimer, the racist history on one side of my family runs very deep, and being as they're from the South, like that includes having direct relations that are within the Klan. And I remember that conversation coming up at a young age. And luckily my father sort of like does do better, and he works very hard within his ignorances to sort of self-educate. He takes a lot of advice from my sisters and I, and even at a younger age, I was able to talk to like, what is this, Dad? What is the Klan? And like, why are we talking about, so-and-so in that way? Because I could tell that the conversation was not about something that I understood. It felt malignant and weird. And it was a very hush-hush sort of in passing conversation at a generational household where lots of family members always join. And I just caught something of it. And he, at some point, explained to me what was going on. And at that moment, at a young age, like I was very aware that like, there's some shit in the Baptist church that I'll never be privy to directly, but I need to know more about. And I can also walk through that memory probably up to age 9, where I finally was like, I disavow all of this. I want nothing to do with the church here.
Many, many, many things I've read. There's a statement that I read or someone said, the most segregated hour in America is Sunday during church time. And
yeah.
I have been a blackface in lots of white spaces many, many, many a time. One of which was when I was in a church with friends, and I was the only blackface there. And I could tell that the pastor was editing himself on the fly because I was there. I could feel it. How does the relationship with family work now that are they still actively clanning?
I don't think so. I think that family member passed away. However, I cannot say that with any confidence whatsoever. And as a matter of a fact, it's hard to conceptualize of actively clanning, because I think even that conversation with my sweet aunt on the back porch is a measure of actively clanning, because that is also part of that process. It's like to be that wife that we're talking about, and to be that Karen that makes those sandwiches on Sundays when you know those boys are going to go out and do what they're doing. And they're not boys, they're men, and they're men that are doing things with such intention. You know, the church is this funny place where it inscribes the beliefs in a I don't know if it's a passive way, right? But it is like where the conditioning starts. It's just, and if it's not my uncle, then it is, you know, the so and so down the road. So it is definitely still a thing. I don't know what those actions look like these days, but
what I wonder, because I've been doing a lot of historical viewing and documentaries. I love watching documentaries. And all these pictures flash up, and when I see a picture of a lynching, for instance, and I see this black body hanging from a tree and all of these white faces looking at the camera, and I'm thinking, where are those people's relatives, and what are their, and how would you feel? You're sitting here with your friends and there's your uncle flashed up on the television. How does that feel for you? It's an interesting question, isn't it?
It is. And I almost like psychologically, like I can sense my brain trying to escape it and pivot to something else, something tertiary but relative, so that I can still feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, which is like engaging that question. But I am also like struggling to just sit there with that. I mean, all I can say in that fleeting moment is like lonely. It isn't lonely though, because it's actually of the majority in this country.
And then those same people who felt appropriate going to lynchings are the same people, or of the same thought process of the people invalidating the vote and storming the Capitol, and responsible for the 48 states making Jim Crow era sweeping voter registration changes in our democracy, because so many BIPOC Black, Indigenous, people of color, showed up and our voices were being heard. What I've been musing on lately is that in America, at least, if you add up all of the minorities, do you know that we would be a collective majority?
Think about that all of the time.
And I feel as if everyone else realizes that as well.
Yeah.
And that is partly responsible for all of the white rage that is based in white fear, that is based in white fragility, because white folks don't like being uncomfortable.
Well,
no, go on.
I have a deep-seated belief that that is like built into whiteness, is like, and generationally, because I do believe in inherited psychological, emotional traumas, angers, all of those I think can be passed down and they can be conditioned. But what I'd say is that like whiteness is malicious, and it has also like called out of it the ability to heal itself. And it's like of the moment now to reintroduce the antithesis to that malice. So because the malice is woven into it, because at its heart it is a meanness, it's a self-effacing, I don't know, malice is the best word. It's violence, right? So, but without, and in the supremacy of it is to take away and minimize the compassion and the capability to care for and heal each other and one another. And I think that that's what white folks are missing, myself included, is like that collective, like, okay, well, in order to heal these festering wounds that we have put upon ourselves and others, we have to actually triage it, hence conversation. And then we need to be able to nurture and fortify and remove all of the toxins that have been put in around it. And I think we're still in the triage phase, and I think it's still early in that triage phase. And every moment that one sits consciously with the violence and the meanness that whiteness is a moment where like they're physically feeling the pain of it for a moment, you know, where it's like, instead of it being displaced and conducted and projected onto other people to perpetuate it, you actually have to feel what the fuck you've done
and sit in it and atone for it.
Why isn't anybody saying sorry? What the hell?
You know, my favorite, because again, been a blackface in lots of white spaces. My parents we didn't own slaves. We were poor too. All of the scapegoating to try to absolve you, your white face, of whatever disrespectful shit you just said to me. Whatever disrespectful. I don't care that you were poor. I don't care that your parents didn't own slaves. What I care about is what just that insult that just flung out of your mouth, based completely in a microaggression, or in some cases a macroaggression, or in some cases downright ignorance.
And ignorance is no excuse. Like, it causes wars. Like,
what usually happens is when, as I've been known to do, I correct you on your mistake, your offense. Oftentimes it is met with a couple of different things. That's not what I really mean. You know, I was just playing. You know, ha ha ha. you know, I got a pass. I'm more black than you are. Various other excuses. And when I was younger, my tongue was a little more venomous. I now don't do that. I've chosen to call you on the offense. If you do not fix your offense, I'm gonna let it slide. I'm just gonna be done. You and I are done. Because I have a thought process behind it. Mm-hmm. You might say some dumbass shit to the wrong person and get your ass beat. That's on you. I tried to stop it. Mm-hmm. You would not listen. So whatever happens to you after that point is on you. But I'm more concerned with the person who has to whoop your ass, because I don't want anything to happen to that person. Yeah.
I feel there's like, I don't know, there's just a disingenuous nature to a lot of what's going on within the popular conversations around race activism. And
I think it's a lot of I'm just doing this for the moment. I'm doing this because it's popular. When last year, when everyone was doing that black square.
Oh yeah.
And at that particular time, my Instagram feed was mostly gay, and, you know, some fashion here, some drag queens here, some hot boys here, some, you know, the usual gay boys.
IG stuff, yeah.
And so I'm scrolling on that day, it's all like black, 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 black. Okay, I go back the next day, the very next day, everybody's thirst trap pictures are all back up. I'm thinking, so you were just using this for the moment. You're just piggybacking on this Black Lives Matter experience to up your social capital.
Yeah.
But the minute that day is over, you go back to your all-white existence. You go back to your all-white friend groups. You go back to your all-white offices. You go back to your all-white neighborhoods. And then you say, why is my neighborhood all white? Why is my office all white? Why is my friend group all white? Mm-hmm. What's that all about? And usually the answer is, I grew up in a conservative background, i.e., I grew up in an all-white neighborhood and conservative background. If I ask you, paint me a picture of a criminal, the first thing in most people's mind is going to be black. If I say, paint me a picture of a drug dealer, in most people's eyes, that first image, that race of that person is going to be black, because you've been programmed to believe that. When in fact, most drug dealers are white teenage boys.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But most people in prison under drug offenses are black and brown people.
Same thing comes down with sex work too, you know, like, what do you picture, what's a hooker look like, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But actually, like, there's an entire middle class of like white female sex workers that aren't getting called out. They aren't getting shot. They aren't getting anything other than glamorized at best, but that doesn't actually represent the work that they're actually doing. But the majority of women within the criminal justice system are not only being criminalized because of hypersexuality and are Black, but also have been subject to egregious mistreatments sexually.
Usually, and in addition to that, probably by the cops that are trying to police them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna let you go back on the beat, but you got to give me a handy. You got to give me a blow. You got stop being. I'm sorry. Go on.
I just, it's, it, I mean, I think drug dealing and drug use is like not a criminal offense in my mind. And it is exactly like what administrations have done in the US White House to put Black bodies in jail. And
Yes,
prison is not just jail, it's
it's
prison and
prison.
it's
Let's talk about
generation.
Reagan. Can we talk about Reagan?
We
The
can't.
oh, I can't even. I can't even. I haven't even been able to finish a sentence about Reagan. I'm so irritated with that whole disaster, that whole war on drugs, that whole just say no while pumping crack into Black neighborhoods because you needed money for a war. So what do? You bring guns and then you pump crack into the Black neighborhoods. And then if you have 5 grams of crack, you go to jail for 20 years, but you have 500 grams of cocaine, you do the same amount of time.
So I'm gonna say something now. And once again, I'm like doing my best to bring up the truth that I experienced while also knowing that like I feel very insecure around that truth, but it's because it's highly stigmatized. However, after living in Tennessee in my formative years, because of drugs and poverty, we moved out. And that race with the lowercase r that I was experiencing through like the direct relationship of like white supremacy in my family and Klansmen and the Southern Baptist Church, it switched 180. We moved to South Florida, and I was in that community the minority. And our household also was dealing with a lot of drug use, a lot of crack.
Okay.
And so was the greater community. That's when race with a capital R started to be part of my perception. And if it weren't for that hardship that we went through, I don't know if I'd be the woman that I am today. I think I would like to think that I wouldn't be actively caring, but I probably would if I had stayed in a predominantly white community and been able to move in those highly lubricated, violenced ways to find my own stability and justify those moves by way of my own hardships. But instead, we moved into one of the largest schools. I went to the largest school in the bottom 7 states, and English was not the first language. Most of the community was dealing with crack addiction, whether it was quiet because some of my classmates were middle class, but a lot of us were working poor. And it was a bit more blatant and obvious. Like when I'd go over to so-and-so's house, I'd be like, oh, your dad's going through the same thing as my dad, you know? It is very clear to me now, though, that like I experienced for the first time. So I'm going to preface this by saying that there is no such thing as reverse racism.
No, that's bullshit.
No.
Just
But
absolute bullshit.
I was able to see like how vicious white supremacy was because of what it meant for my white body to be in these predominantly Hispanic and Black communities. And I felt, and I still feel the weight of that. It is what a revelation to realize that like your people have been so fucking mean to other people that just as a daily act, you see and feel the backlash of that. And just as like a young woman at that point, as a young girl, like I was like very well aware that like something was going on. I didn't know what it was yet, but then that like race as like a capital R started to emerge. Like this is a construct. And like I can say that now at 36, I wouldn't have had that language when I was 21. You know, I was fortunate enough that eventually I developed really strong relationships where we could have some of these conversations, and we usually talked about it in a more like lofty spiritual way, because that's one of the things is like spirituality and like alternative medicine became a very important part of culture that had to subsist underneath whiteness. So like the healing had to happen in those communities because it wasn't of that dominance. And yet this dominance right now is being called into question, and it needs to start to learn those healing processes. And I know that sounds really cryptic. I just don't want to go too deep into that conversation because I like where we're going with this conversation. But I wanted to not just anecdotally add, but very clearly add that like that system of imposition of the drug war, it just so happened to clip my family and pull it into it. And if it weren't for that, I don't know if I would know how to move in an anti-racist way today. And I still feel very inept and I fuck it up all of the time, but it matters to me deeply. That's all.
I understand that. Now, being a white face in black and brown spaces, namely in your school, how were you treated?
I would, I mean, there was a lot, I got in a lot of fights. I got ignored, or like language was a big part of it too. So like, and also learning to be very comfortable now these days around other languages, and also like adapting to that when I was younger, because I had both loving and unloving experiences around like, she's white, we're just going to speak Spanish, like she's not part of this conversation. So learning to like sit with that discomfort and being like, it's okay, I'm safe. And like, we're still going to have fun. We're still going to eat together, but there's just some conversations that aren't for me. And that's okay. I'm happy to be here. I feel like grateful to be like in community. But there were also like, you know, lunch table dramas. I started smoking cigarettes really young, just so I could go hide in the bathroom and smoke cigarettes.
I'll go smoke. Yeah.
Exactly. So that I could save face. I didn't have to go stand in line and sort of, because I would shrink into myself. I would cower. I was still within my shell. I hadn't pushed back against anything yet. I had just come out of that Southern Baptist community where like, as a female, as a white female, you have to act like this and be prepared for this. And this is your value. And if you do not fulfill these standards of beauty and action and respectability, then you're a pariah and you're going to hell. Yeah. And it's not going to be fun on the way. And I found out really fast that path was actually quite fabulous. So
you're like, wait, I'm going to hell? I have to be so chaste and pure to go? I don't believe that.
I don't believe that. No.
I don't believe that. Yeah, I've had many conversations because I've been told so many times I'm going to hell. I was like, I don't believe that. I feel like if you knew where I was going, I think one of those rules is judge not lest ye be judged. So why are you judging me? Why are you coming for me? Why are you trying to tell me where I'm gonna go? Why you want to be there with me? I don't get it.
Microaggressions earlier, and like the closest sensation and concept to hell that I can come up with is like having to like sit with someone else's microaggression and not be able to like get any acknowledgement around it. It is so painful. It is shitty. It is just straight up shitty. Like an aggression I can counteract, I can choose to engage or not, but microaggressions are just these, they like they're like acidic and they sink in and they burn away at you. And I'm like, you know, these actions that are going to put me into hell are these very conscious, consensual things that I'm doing. And yet there's these non-consented moments where you're in denial about the terrible thing that you just said and did. And I can't even ask you to stop because you refuse to even see it. And that makes me feel not human.
You don't even believe it's happening. You don't even, you're just being too sensitive.
And you've just denied me my humanity, and I'm not clearly an equal because you don't trust me enough to believe me that it just happened. So you've turned me into a subhuman. I'm less than you right now when I say that.
Yeah. Good times. Happy memory.
Yeah. I know too that like we're gonna hang out again, and there are always gonna be these times where like things slip from my lips where I'm like, what the fuck? Where did that just come from? I just said that. It takes a moment of pause. I think that white folks don't pause.
What's really interesting about that, because I know that having microaggressions that have been programmed into you since birth, and they may fly out. part of my journey in life is see something, say something.
Yeah.
So I'm always going to say what I want to say. I'm going to say what I say. I made a point to not be so cautious around white folks and call you on your bullshit, call you on your white people shit when you're doing it. Otherwise, you won't learn.
It's true.
But I do it in such a way that it's going to be wrapped in sarcasm and humor. And I do it that way because people tend to learn easier when they're laughing.
Yeah, that disarming thing. And that's the thing is like, whether white people want to acknowledge or not, we're walking around with this fucking arsenal. And it is expressed in so many different ways. But what I want to say is that I believe and understand deeply the value of what you're offering, because it's not your job to do that.
No, I know.
And however, it's transformative, because I can say that like amongst ourselves as white folks, like we're still so clinging to those weapons and not relinquishing it and creating and opening up. Like as soon as you lay down that heavy burden, that arm, and you've opened up that space, you don't have as much in your hands, you have room to like hold something else, but man, it's just not happening. And by pointing out that someone is fucking up, yeah, they do have the ability to choose to continue to do that or not, or to even take it home and think about it. And even if it takes, weeks or months, like just continue to like look at that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you find it, say you're sorry.
Just
and
say you're
thank
sorry.
the person. Yeah. And so you won't do your best not to do it again.
Totally sorry. I did not realize that. I sincerely apologize. I was having a conversation with a friend from Alaska a couple weeks ago, and I used the E word. And he pointed something out to me that was not appropriate for. I was like, oh my God, I am so sorry.
No.
I did not know that, but now I know it. So that is not a word that I use anymore.
Yeah.
Because I know that if it offends one single person, that means I shouldn't use it. And
Yeah.
I don't believe that that's policing my language. What I do believe that it's allowing me to be more creative in the words that I use.
And I think that's that don't fight racism with racism, fight racism with solidarity. In my mind, that moment of solidarity is like a recognition of like, well, I didn't understand and I didn't know, but like I know and I trust you. Like that's why we're sitting together in the first place. So I'm here for it until it clicks in my mind. I'm gonna move with you and like back to back. We've got this. I know that there are going to be times too where like I need to go and sit by myself and handle this alone because I don't want to put it on you anymore.
Mm-hmm. And if you've been told something is offensive, hey, that was some racist shit you just said. It is not up to me to tell you why it's racist. I mean, I can if I want to. If I want to, I can. But if I say that's some racist shit, it is up to you to go through and do the work to figure out why.
Why?
Yeah. That's on you because you said it. So you go with God. I've said some things. Now you go home and you think about it. You can come back later and you're all like, you know what I did? That was some fucked up shit I said. I know. We're good. Let's hug it out and move on. Now,
Yeah.
do you know why you said it? All right. Do you know why it was offensive? All right. Love you. Let's move on.
No, but instead, part of the programming of being particularly like a white woman is to try to fix the thing immediately, right? Because you're so fucking afraid that like you're not safe because of what's been put upon you. But then what that does is it points that ignorance, that maliciousness back down, and it starts to oppress again. Mm-hmm. As in like the want to fix something in the moment. Hell, you'll know real fast if it's making it worse. But why keep pushing like and making it worse? The presence of mind is something you have to cultivate to recognize when you're actually actively hurting someone.
Mm-hmm. You should stop talking now. It's like we're done. We're done.
Tears and over talking, like it is definitely something that white women are taught.
Oh, yes.
That's
Oh,
part of that overly spacious personal space, and it manifests even in like sitting next to someone on the bus, where it's like,
mhm.
I need this much. I don't actually need that much, but it's also emotional. It's also yeah, in the face of failure or discomfort, where we take up more space to try to buffer ourselves, you know.
Which is, as I understand it, walking around whilst female is quite difficult because men are disgusting.
Mm.
We've programmed and conditioned men to act on the most carnal of urges and then excuse it away with boys will be boys.
But
We
I feel like
excuse
that
it
affects
away.
all women. And it's funny how white women choose to do their whatever in that other way, because it's not discriminatory. Like, you know, especially sexual violence is not about, as we started our conversation, we talked about power.
Mm-hmm.
That's a conversation about power. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that primal urge thing is not actually about, I don't believe, about a physical connection. It's about dominance
Yep.
again. So like, why, how come we're all coming up with different ways to deal with it? Somebody just told you that your way of dealing with it is fucking with their way of dealing with it. So maybe we could compromise at the very least.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like, just relax.
Mm.
Just relax. We're all trying to just get through our day. You don't have to come crazy at me. I'm not coming crazy at you. Just relax. Unclench your purse. Just take a breath. Trust me, I don't want it. Just relax. Just relax.
The thing of like, you don't,
Don't want
I don't know where the like whiteness came up with the idea that we have something that other people want that they cannot also get and do themselves.
Oh, no, no,
And
no, 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 no. We have, as a nation, as I said earlier, we've programmed us all to believe that criminals are black and brown, that people who are out for your delicate fares
mm,
are black and brown men just out to rape you, out to kidnap you, out to harm you, out to break in your house, out to steal whatever it is you've worked so hard on, out to take whatever it is you think you deserve because you deserve it and they don't. Out to do whatever, out to cause you harm because we have criminalized blackness. We've always done it. We've done it by using the word thug. We've done it by using the word ghetto, inner city, urban, black on black crime, which is bullshit. I fucking hate that term. Black on black crime. Well, let's talk about white on white crime. We'll
yeah.
talk about crime being some usually of opportunity. So people usually commit crimes in their own neighborhoods. And our neighborhoods have been segregated by design.
Yeah.
So, and then usually speaking, when white crime happens, it's emptying out a mutual fund, fucking up 30 people's retirement, 100 people's retirement. And then they get slapped on the hand, go to federal prison. They spend 30 or 50 weeks there. They get out, they don't have to repay the money. So who's the real criminal? And then you have old boy over here robbing a store because his baby doesn't have food because he got put in jail for having a joint when he was 14 years old. So now he's a felon and now he can't get a job, but we're expecting him to pull himself up by his bootstraps when we've cut those boots, when we haven't given him boots.
What about selling drugs is as pulling someone, like that's pulling yourself up by your fucking bootstraps. It's like, this is what I have access to, and I have things I have to take care of. And this is an entrepreneurial endeavor. And if we really wanted to co-opt that into capitalism, by all means, one should be looking at that as like, this is a small business person who's very capable of networking and promoting in sales and holding down their finances.
But then we put a white face on it.
Yeah, and that's
And
actually
we
what
turn
it is.
no,
Call it a
no,
pharmacist.
no. Then we turn the whole marijuana industry.
Oh, that's
Marijuana
so
industry.
cool.
There
Yeah.
are weed millionaires that look like you. There are weed, most of them look like you. When people who look like me are lame, just like in jail. 1 joint, 2 joints, an ounce. I'm in jail for 20 years while Todd over here is making $3.2 million on a marijuana stock that he learned how to grow while watching this Latin fella or this black fella.
Yeah.
Come on now. Let's
And getting land ownership as well on top of it, where it's like, this is where the grants that fund people of color to get land for the first time, whether you want to grow weed on it or not. But if they can fund, you know, Jack Smith from the burbs to like put a business plan together to do medical marijuana, like, this is not what needs to be happening right now. Like,
Jack Smith is a good investment because have you seen his credit score? Have you seen the Ivy League college that he got into? Have you seen his father's 401k? Have you seen his dossier? Have you seen the assets that he brings to the table? You know, John Smith, his father runs this company and his grandfather runs this company. But, you know, John Smith is going out on his own. He's starting this business up on his own.
He's an entrepreneur.
He's an entrepreneur.
I would just like to add that, like, what those guys have done, those John Smiths, when it comes to colonization, like, it's still just this active thing that's happening. Those weed farms are being put on land that was prior to that not toxic. They're toxifying the land. They're overbearing the grid. So then you have a class issue going on because the people that were rural, I mean, it just, and then it's also taking over Oakland now, like Oakland, which has held itself down as a community that I think has been, I'm from Philadelphia these days, and the most beautiful place to go for me is to go to Oakland. They are sister cities and I love them both. And now it's not that anymore because all of the weed farmers, all of the Jack Smiths have moved into the industrial spaces there. They got their land up in the north. They dumped chemicals all over their GMO weed crops. And now they're also holding up their processing facilities in the neighborhoods that they wouldn't have gone to 20 years prior. But now that they get to steal the land again, they're going to live there. And all of a sudden, you know, that 401k is theirs.
Yep. Artisan pickle shops will show up.
Oh, and it's, as an artist, I'm like, yeah, I don't know why. Gentrification is not something any white artist seems to be capable of talking about. It's like, wait, why did you move to Brooklyn from where you were before? Did you realize that when you were doing that, you were doing a thing? Like, still do it. If you need it, do it. Just know that you're fucking doing it. And then make sure you share what you get out of that, at least a little.
No. How dare you?
No, because it's not happening. Even if someone who's perfectly intelligent and of the same race as you, so like talking to other white people about this, we're like 5 minutes prior in the conversation, I was a respectable, capable, intelligent woman. But the moment that I say that, like, well, what do you think about your gentrification? Like, that's, I've just debased myself. I am no longer someone to trust. I'm not actually telling them something that might be happening or that is worth talking about. I've just disqualified myself entirely.
How dare you? How dare you bring up the obvious?
And it's like, but you don't realize that like there was generational homes in that neighborhood before. Like, I'm house hunting in Philadelphia right now. And I'm like, man, it's real hard to find a house right now that hasn't been foreclosed on. And I'm not sure I want to move into that energy. And I also just don't have enough money to like find a pre-existing strong neighborhood. Like I'm in Washington Heights in Manhattan right now, and I like living here because I know this neighborhood has held down its own identity. I'm right next to Puerto Rico College. Like my white face makes a difference on the block. It changes the property value of the block. However, the Dominican community here has not fucking budged. And I walk around my neighborhood and I feel perfectly safe. And if I don't feel perfectly safe, well, then I walk my happy ass back home and find my center and continue moving on and wonder what made me feel that way.
Exactly.
It's not that it wasn't appropriate, but it oftentimes is inappropriate. But that's for me to handle, not to put like out in there in the world. Like I'll still make my happy ass go back down to the bodega and spend my money where it goes. Best of the community. And I don't know, I don't have any like sort of answers, but the observations are overwhelming. It would be fabulous if that was something that we all wanted to work on together.
You know what's really interesting, when Scott and I went looking, we live in Harlem, 141 and Lenox.
No, that's
at the Savoy. Yes. When we went looking for apartments two years ago, we went. Sometimes we would go separately. Sometimes we would go together. When I would go by myself, I would be shown some unsavory places. When Scott went by himself, he was shown some beautiful places. When we went together, this is the best place we found. Where we currently are is the best apartment we were shown as a couple. And none of them were the places that Scott was shown alone, because we used 3 different people.
Yeah.
And we used the person that showed us joint things, and Scott says, "Hey, can we go see this place?" No, it's not available. I just saw it yesterday. Yeah, it's not available.
I don't know what it's going to take for this conversation to happen more publicly. But like, if we're going to live in a world that has property ownership and private property, one of the direct relationships to keeping people oppressed is not making stable housing accessible. And that means ownership. If we're living in a system where you can own a stack of wood and a border under your feet, you know, and I don't, out of this story or my experience in Philadelphia, do I see like in any sort of mass culture a conversation around like how biased and directly fucked up the housing system is.
I think that is up to us, the anti-racists in the world, I have no other choice but to call it when I see it, and call what I see.
Yeah.
You can challenge me all you want to, but you can't take away what I see. You may have a different impression of it, and we can discuss that. And perhaps I'm overreacting. I'm usually not.
No.
I'm almost never overreacting. I'm almost never reading into anything. Almost never. But I'm more than willing to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's safety and stability go hand in hand. And the first thing that we can do is, you're right, like opening up and showing that there's ample space for people to feel safe and secure in these conversations, so that things like the security of having a home that you can go back to despite changes and hardships in economy and family dynamics, etc. Like having grown up without a stable home, I moved like 14 times in total by the end of it all, directly related to like how I had to act around my own white fragility, because I was so in fear of being poor and homeless again. And I know now that jump from like growing up that way and in one generation as a unmarried white woman with a child to be able to get a house, to buy, like that's directly related to my white privilege.
Yes, it is.
And I also know that like I don't wake up feeling safe and secure every day, and I hope that having like a place to go back to will help that. I think it will. I've seen what it's done for other people. I don't understand where the critiques, like, until that's accessible to BIPOC communities, we are resigning the white community is resigning the BIPOC community to feeling insecure.
Well, what it tells BIPOC is you can live where we allow it. And the minute you get out of your station, it's okay, we'll move. Because everyone has always associated, and the banks have reinforced, when Black folks move into the neighborhood, property value goes.
Yeah. But we'll allow you to rent in the neighborhoods that we want you to rent in, so we can continue to garner a profit.
Well,
too.
I don't really want you to rent in this neighborhood.
No, that's exactly what you and Scott went through.
Come here. How dare you? You're getting a little too high on. You're getting a little too uppity. Another trigger word.
Oh, I had to research that one recently. I didn't know the origins of that word, and I spent a good part of a day being like, this one's deep. And then I thought of all of the times that it came out of my mouth. And I was like, holy shit, I only wielded that in certain scenarios. And even when it was wielded at like myself or another white person, it was under a certain context that directly related to how it was originally used. So just reinforcing, like re-imbuing it with that meaning again. Yeah, that is no longer part of my vocabulary.
Yep. There's a lot of these words that we use, and once we know the origin of them, you just have to stop.
And it's yeah,
and
you just do.
There are some words that I use I use them on purpose because I know the history of them.
Yeah,
like the word, like that word uppity I just used. I can't tell you how many times I've been called that in my life. I can't tell you. I've been called that more frequently than the N-word.
I think two things just happened to me. And one of them is out of ignorance and naivety and like the layers of self-protection that I think I go through as a white woman, that I'm, I have to strip it down regularly. I didn't consider the fact that anybody had ever called you that word. And then second to that, I didn't consider the fact that like it had also come in tow with the dual offense of the other word too. But I think profoundly, it just struck me that like the reality of the situation, and it comes home to roost often, and it comes up in these moments. And there's no words, there's like nothing. There's no words, there's no, it's just a very galvanizing feeling of like, today, this is how I'm gonna move. I'm moving. I don't know, yeah.
Well, I would challenge you to change the perspective and hear it as a trigger word, process the meaning through it, correct the use of that word, and move on.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what I'm teaching myself to do, that exact process, because walking around did you freeze up on me?
Oh, I hope
no. You're sitting so still. No, but doing the work that I'm doing, I get a lot of things said at me and to me and about me. I understand that they are coming from a place of fear.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that they're coming from a place of fear. And I hear what is being said. I process the meaning through it, and it's and most of the time I ignore it. Most of the time I ignore it. There are some that I'm like, okay, this one's too good. This one's too good. I have to respond.
Yeah.
But
Whereas,
most of them I ignore. Yeah. I got into a conversation with somebody about what movie was that? Hidden Figures. And the scene where the guy goes to knock down the whites only sign or something in the bathroom. Then I said to the gentleman, I was like, you know that scene actually didn't happen. It was put in there to get white people to co-sign on the white savior narrative of this movie. He went crazy. And I heard all of the things that he said, and I was like, okay, what this is classic white fragility. What you're doing, you're giving all of these defenses for a statement that disagrees with the white narrative you have in your head. Since you are a white fella and you cried at that moment, I know that you cried at that moment because that's what that moment was put in there for.
yeah.
And you played into that narrative and got you to believe even more so about this partnership between this black man and white woman, with this white man coming to save this black woman, as if this black woman couldn't save herself.
You know what I'm realizing right now is that, like, as a white person, we have to agree to be reduced down to our whiteness. Like, we are agreeing to it in this way that, like, to call someone out on something like that, to have it shake them at the foundation, just goes to show that they identify first and foremost with being a white man, instead of seeing themselves as like complex and like dynamic creatures that have a race and have an identity and have multiple facets within that identity. What that is saying to me is that that person fundamentally, first and foremost, owns and accepts, or just accepts, perhaps not consciously, that like this is who they are, and that is like the predominant narrative in their mind.
Mm-hmm. That's the only narrative in their mind.
You should not be shaken to the core when someone points this out to you. You should say, if this is so hard for me to handle, why am I simplifying myself? Why am I reducing myself to that? And I think that that's where it comes down to, like, if at the core of that is this maliciousness and this violence, like, you are choosing to be that, then you can choose to not be that. And you can choose to like act a fool in this moment if you must while talking to Jonathan, but perhaps taking some time to evaluate and see that, like, in order for you to value other human life, you have to value your own, but you cannot devalue it by seeing yourself as this simple, like, placated thing. I don't know.
I think it boils down to a very simple thing. It's written on my t-shirt. I truly believe that white folks, the standard normal, whenever you say normal, you want to get back to normal. What that means is white dominated society where black and brown BIPOC can exist as well, as long as we are playing our parts. The minute we're not playing our parts, we are no longer humanized, because there's no humanity in something that I view as savage, something that I view as less than I am. So whiteness is allowed to be individual. BIPOC is usually looked at as a monolith.
Mm-hmm.
If you're black, I have in my mind a specific idea of what a black man is supposed to be.
a Black woman is supposed to be. I don't care where you're from. In my mind, this is what a Black person is supposed, how a Black person is supposed to operate. This is how an Asian person is supposed to operate. This is how a Latin person is supposed to operate. And anything outside of that, how dare you? If you're stepping outside of my perceived lane that I've put you in, how dare you? And it's easier for me to disassociate that because you have gone off script for what I've decided deemed necessary for you as a race of person. Mm-hmm. So it's easier for me to dehumanize you. It's easier for me to wish you ill will, much like when we celebrate winning a war. We dehumanize the opposition of that war. Those are mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, aunts and uncles that have been murdered through maybe they weren't part of the cause, because wars are usually fought by rich men all the way up here and children fighting those battles for them.
Yeah.
But it's easier for us to celebrate a war. It's easier for us to celebrate deporting people. It's easiest for us to celebrate, to watch somebody be murdered on camera by cops and know and feel comfort in the fact that that person is no longer here because you didn't see them as human anyway. That's how it's done.
I can say for a matter of a fact that my life experience is richer and better because I have lasting and loving relationships with people of color and white people. Mm-hmm. And like, I imagine in a lot of scenarios, and I see it happen, that there isn't that co-investment because of the fact that folks aren't, you don't see someone as human. How do you love them? How do you get to have that relationship? You can perform it, you can pretend it, but if you can't sit at the dinner table and have that hard conversation and still stomach your meal together, or still take the time to revisit when the time is right, or change said action, like, where was your love and commitment in the first place? It wasn't with that person, it was to yourself.
Yeah, it was performative.
It sounds lonely.
Yeah,
that sounds lonely
it does, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Now, I know that I've dragged white folks. I want everyone to know that I love everyone. You know that I do. I do. I love everyone. And what I hope for the world is that we can sit and have these uncomfortable conversations. We can sit with the fact that representatives from your race have made BIPOC's life horrible continuously.
To this day.
To this day. And you operate in white spaces. And the only thing that I ask, because I'm done with having allies, I don't want allies anymore. I want accomplices. And the accomplice will stand with me, not stand for me, but stand with me. And when I take somebody down, the accomplice is all like, you got that right. The accomplice cosigns every single time. This has happened. Scott and I, our anniversary is Thursday. But we were out one day, minding our own business, looking cute, wearing rompers. And we were on our way to a UPS store to mail off some masks, and Scott had painted a painting. And this young white lady was in front of us, and she was being completely disrespectful to the Latin woman at the counter named Jennifer. Now, Scott and I love us some Jennifer because we had gone to this particular UPS store a lot of times. So she's just going off on Jennifer, so on and so forth. And she's working, so she couldn't talk to this woman the way she needed to be talked to. But I could. And but I could because I wasn't working. And I say to her, you know, it's absolutely disrespectful the way that you're talking to this woman who's trying to help you with something that you did wrong. I don't why are you talking to me like that? I was like, what do you mean? I'm just calling you on the fact that you're being disrespectful to this other human.
Meeting you where you're at, lady. That's what I'm doing.
He says to me, we go back and forth, and I'm like, and I'm just as calm as I know how to be, just relaxed. I was in such a great mood. Yeah, we were having a lovely day. And then she says to me, she looks me right in the eye, and she says, I tried to kill myself 3 days ago. And I said to her, well, that's unfortunate. You should probably try and fix your attitude so that these things won't happen to you in the future.
Yeah.
She says, and then the tears came. And then she looked at my white boyfriend, Scott. And she says, why is he talking to me like this? And Scott says, well, you deserve it. I'm sorry, you're being completely inappropriate to everyone in the room. You've made everyone in here feel uncomfortable. But you don't understand. He's being so mean, blah, blah, blah. And then Scott says, well, I'm actually talking to you more harshly than he is. And then I was like, okay, young lady, I think it's time for you to go. You can't. I was like, here you go, please. I would ask of you not to police my tone. And I need you to leave the room. She said, the next day, well, the next time we went to that UPS store, Jennifer calls us over and she says, you know, you remember that girl? I was like,
yeah, how could I forget?
She says, her mother called.
Wow.
And her mother says, and I quote, do you know who I am? I'm the head doctor of so-and-so. I am Dr. So-and-so. I will have you fired. What I tell that story to say that racism isn't something that we're born with. It's something that is taught.
Yeah.
And the venom that was coming out of that young lady's mouth was learned behavior from her mother.
Yeah.
And that learned behavior from her mother came from her mother. And so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if Jennifer didn't give a damn about that job, and Jennifer didn't have any kids to take care of, I'm not assuming, I'm just saying Jennifer, I think Jennifer does have children. Anyway.
We should always assume that anybody in a service position that is of color is at least taking care of someone else in their life, because that's a community strength right there, whether it's a grandma or a partner in jail or children.
Somebody. But Jennifer, if she were not such a dignified professional, if she were having a bad day, if anything, she could have eviscerated that young girl and then lost her job. But since I was recreational, I'm recreational. So I can say whatever I want to. What are you going to do? Call the cops and say I made you cry?
I'm so appreciative too that Scott pointed out, like, I'm talking to you more harshly than he is. It's like that instance of Scott's perception of the moment, like that is, you know,
I'm telling you, he's my accomplice. He's my accomplice.
Like, not only did he not step in and try to rewrite the work that you were doing, as in like, you've got this, Jonathan, like, I don't need to like fight that for you. You're doing a great job. I support you. And when it steps into my lane, I am just going to stay the course that you are on. And also just, I mean, all that was done in that moment was like, when you're telling me this story is like, how is this woman acting to the Black and brown people in this
In her
line
life.
versus the one white man in front of her that's like actually putting her in her place, like, you
And
know?
my question is, we were in Harlem when this happened. So she's walking around with this horrible anti-Blackness in a predominantly historically Black neighborhood.
Harlem is
How are you treating your neighbors? How are you treating the people at your bodega? How are you treating the people at your train stop? How are you treating everybody if this is the venom you're walking around here? And then for me to get me to change my course of action by throwing this, I tried to kill myself 3 days ago. I don't give a shit. I don't
you're just
care.
bringing that, like, are you actively trying to make everyone else want to kill themselves too? Because it sounds like you might be on that level right now.
You know what she wanted me to do was be nice and sweet to her because she was having something, and you know the world revolves around her, and no, it doesn't matter if anybody else is having problems. Tiffany's having a problem, and we all need to stop and relax and be really, really kind to Tiffany because she's having a bad day. Bye, Tiffany. Kristina, darling, this has been so much fun.
Listen, I feel so loved. Let me tell you, I feel there is just a graciousness to the time that you're taking to do these conversations that I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Jonathan.
Of
Like,
course.
I know that there's a lot of heavy, big talk that goes on, but like, it is such a measure of love. And I hope you know how much I care and respect you and care for you and love you too.
Oh, I love you back. And I can't wait to go roller skating as soon as
I
Scott's
know.
good.
I'm just coming off of a meniscus injury, so I've been moving real slow, which is a perfect time to teach all of those good, stable positions that we'll both need because there's going to be some falling involved.
I haven't fallen yet. I haven't fallen
Oh,
yet. Do
this
you
is
know
a big
that
deal.
it was in 2019. We went ice skating I had never been on ice skates before in my entire life.
I'm not good at them.
We skated for like 3 hours and neither one of us fell one time.
Oh man, that sounds like a fun day too.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun.
Well, I know that, what is it? It's Randall's Island, especially
Mhm.
when there's no concerts happening. Like, there's a huge smooth parking lot there. And then there's all these wonderful little trails and bridges that are pretty good. There's also some hills, so you might want to gear up after walking to the flat area.
Okay.
But I can also teach bombing hills and shooting the duck and all that good stuff too.
I don't know what any of that means, so sure.
Okay.
I've never been to Randall's Island either.
Yeah. It's all right. It's got like a little nature preserve there and shady bits and sunny bits, water to look at. I go with my friend Max all the time. So if we go soon, I will message you and Scott and let you know so that perhaps we can skate together.
Absolutely. All right, doll. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. I will. Thanks to this, it's even bigger and brighter.